So, A Happy Death by Albert Camus is technically his first work, if you think about it, because he actually wrote this. I believe this is the first work, book that Camus worked on intensely, but it wasn't actually published until posthumously, against his will, in the same kind of manner that a lot of Kafka's work was published. And I don't know if he felt so strongly, if he didn't really feel all that drawn and kind of to it, because I feel like this is a lot of people just correlate and kind of compare this book to The Stranger or The Outsider or L'Étranger. I think it's L'Étranger in French. But yeah, so the French Algerian, Albert Camus, obviously, was born in 1913, passed away in 1960 at the age of 46, and in a kind of, I don't want to say freak car accident, but it definitely was something that was a little bit kind of odd. Probably tragically ironic in a sense, because he was actually quite, had a lifelong fear of automobiles. So anyway, that's hope enough of a bio. That's sufficient. But yeah, so Happy Death, it talks about a man named Patrice Meursault, and he, like the Meursault of The Stranger, is a kind of man in his kind of young, not, I'm not sure how early we see this on, but I'm assuming he's probably in his late 20s, early 30s, and he's living kind of a humdrum, dry, routine existence of as a I believe like a clerk. He works this office job kind of, this kind of idea of the kind of working your 8 hours or your 6 hours or whatever kind of plays into this too, even as far back as the 40s. And yeah, so he has a kind of a predictable relationship with his job and a woman by the name of Marthe, I think. And she is kind of has all these other lovers on the side. She doesn't find Meursault's kind of lack of empathy or romantic love kind of all that surprising, maybe. Like, she's actually kind of finds that like a little bit relieving too, because she's like has 10 other lovers that she talks about, and then that's when we start to see Meursault kind of show his kind of true feelings, I guess, towards her, when he's like kind of seems to be a little bit almost jealous for her. So since this is kind of a Meursault in this book, which is quite short. It's like a novella. It's like a little over 100 pages, I think. So an easy read, kind of just like The Stranger as well. It's like kind of similar length. But yeah, but I felt like Meursault was a little bit more, in this, was a little bit more likable than in The Stranger. Obviously, it's not to say that both characters aren't pretty relatable, depending on certain where you are in life, and I think there's like something to do with the existential kind of question of meaning and finding meaning and where that is, and like the kind of meaningless death that shooting an Arab really didn't like have any consequence for him in his head, because it just was him, just literally, it was just like he said, like it was like the sun blinded him. It was in him that did it. So we see that kind of early kind of incipient seeds of existentialism play through, or the absurd, I should say, because Camus himself, I don't know if he actually liked to identify with the term existentialism. Sartre did, though. Sartre was the king of all that. But here we have Meursault, and he befriends early on in the book, a man named Roland Zagreus. I think that's a mythological figure. That's kind of it's a melding of Zeus and who needs no introduction, obviously, and Persephone. So I'm a little bit rusty on the god, what Persephone is, but I think it's like a kind of there's some, I'm sure it was intentional, the way that why he named that character Zagreus. But he tells him that the only way to be happy is that it takes time to be happy. He says that though he's crippled, he can't walk, he can't, he's, I think, kind of paraplegic from the sense I got. He got in a car accident. So he says that only it takes time to be happy. a lot of time. Happiness too is a long patience. In almost every case, we end up making ourselves making money when we should be using our money to gain time. So this is interesting because he's not just kind of like playing, like he's not just like espousing the kind of mundane kind of like, oh, like all like money is the main kind of end be all goal, the kind of thing in itself, or the end in itself, when we should be using it as a simple means to an end of just kind of, okay, we should just acquire money, yes, but also, and he's talked about how at 25 he amassed his kind of fortune, and he made his millions, literally, like he talks about how he made 1,000,000 francs or whatever the currency standard was then. But yeah, he talks about how he made his. I'm assuming what to be translated in the version I read to be about $1,000,000 to $2,000,000. So he made it that not out of kind of a venal kind of opportunistic way of just kind of watching like little like Machiavellian kind of things and tactics, but I think he just kind of worked diligently and kind of smarter and not trying to not necessarily cut corners, but yeah, he definitely has this kind of interesting way. So what happens is he realizes that because he's crippled, he can't actually use the stuff he has. He has to have somebody like he has to pay somebody to like to take him to the bathroom, and he cannot actually enjoy the life that he's built. So he asks Bersault to kill, or no. Bersault takes it on himself. This is where things get kind of melded. Bersault ends up shooting him, and then he tries to create his own kind of life of happiness and contentment with the man's money. And so he jumps on a train, and so I believe it's split into two parts. So this is part two. So part two is titled Conscious Death, and part one was called Natural Death. So okay, so that part one was conscious, and this one was natural. So this consists of Mersault going to various places in Europe, going from train to train, which is a very fun thing to do because, like especially if you don't need, especially if you have your passport, you could easily go through any country in the EU. But yeah, so what he does is he kind of goes to all these different places, and he doesn't really find much leeway or any kind of gratitude or any kind of the happiness that the rich Roland Zaguz talks about. So he goes back to Algiers. That's where he's from, and he talks about interesting things like his back in Algiers, the memories of. This is where I think he draws from Camus' own autobiographical life a little bit, in that he talks about his mother and like that at 56 years old, that I think she died, and that she had the way she was like, she was beautiful when she was younger, especially, and that she was the way that she had kind of maybe a bit of a harsh way around her, a bit tempestuous, and just interesting kind of memories of that, the Proustian kind of memories that reminded me of this kind of working class kind of lifestyle that Camus, I think, was drawn from, and like bits of that kind of are parallel to his own life. But anyway, so he returns back to this home place, and ends up living close to the sea in a kind of sunny place. He's like swimming and kind of engaging in these different things, trying to treat himself, trying to kind of treat himself to a good life. And then basically he ends up abandoning the world and kind of isolating himself, but not necessarily in a totally like negation of human life. He's like still has some friends, and he has lovers, and he has I think he has 3 kind of girlfriends that he has at any given time, and he's says at this point, he's like, at this hour of the night his life seemed so remote to him. He was solitary and indifferent to anyone, everything to himself, and as well Mersault himself had least attained to filled him now was born of that patient self-abandonment he pursued and achieved with the help of this warm world so willing to deny him without any anger. So so that's an interesting thing, because it's beautiful. It's actually quite subliminal. It's like I got a nice poetic tenor to it that I believe this is like pretty darn. And I think that lends itself. It's probably because of the fact that it's written from a third person kind of omniscient narrator who kind of looks into these different lives. So, but you do get kind of a extra generous look into Mersault's life, but it's not quite as bleak as The Stranger. The Stranger's like, it goes a little bit more. This one kind of delves into the kind of this thing of the kind of almost the Rastignac question of like, poor by Goria with Balzac, in the fact that, you know, what does he do? Like, what, you know, like, you reach this point where he's like, should he choose, like, you know, a life of kind of taking advantage of others and being kind of a, you know, just kind of gossiping superficially among other people, or should he actually just kind of live an honest life? And you know, you have these different things, and I think like Camus takes a more of that approach, like kind of like, but there's it's not kind of a moral. It's not kind of a moral book. I don't think he walks. You know, I don't think you walk away with kind of the question of like how. It's not kind of a normative ethic. I don't think the way that Camus talks about this, but I think he paints a picture of kind of a very, very interesting question of like what it takes to be happy. And I think with Mersault at the end of the novel, he ends up falling terribly ill, and I'm not sure if it's tuberculosis, but I don't think he survived if it was. But yeah, the seemed to be rampant at the time, and I think at this time he dies a happy death, like the title says. So, and that, you know, that at the end his doctor, you know, was like able to, you know, he didn't really have any deathbed regrets, and that's an interesting thing, because even though he kind of did these things, and like I'm not sure if it's like an Ubermensch kind of Nietzschean way, but in a kind of weird warped version of that, the way he kind of kills Roland and takes his life, like kind of takes it over, but it also he is also at peace with it, this life that he takes. So it's like a weird thing where he's like, it's almost like he's living by like this Prepel's advice, yes, but he's like, oh, but I'm gonna take your life, and because you don't see like you're doing it, and I care having fun anymore, so I'm just gonna do what you said and take your world and subsume it, I guess. So interesting, very very well written. I was expecting a little bit something different, but I didn't, you know, expect there to be kind of well, there are parallels to The Stranger, obviously, and like I said, it's like a lighter note, I think, a more upbeat, I think, whereas Mersault in The Stranger kind of takes it to the grave, you know, he just takes that whole this kind of, you know, absurdity of, you know, like, let there be cries of hatred greeting me at my execution. But yeah, I that is A Happy Death by Albert Camus, and I definitely recommend it. And thanks for watching.